Firat Erdim guides his kite through the air above the waters of Lake Macbride. This isn't your average kite. It dances in the wind, attached through the line to a device Erdim holds that produces sound. Video of the performance is recorded.
It's really nice to be able to get the line, the kite line, to be as far out as possible. It really starts to pick up, it starts to vibrate in some really beautiful ways the longer the line is.
This Kite Choir is Erdim's contribution to the 20 Artists, 20 Parks project celebrating the 100th anniversary of Iowa's state park system. A professor in the Department of Architecture at Iowa State University, Erdim has had drawings and installations exhibited across the country and internationally.
It's really, the sound is about that tether between the kite and myself, and I need to pay attention to that. Like that's the dialogue that I'm really engaged in, you know. So there's no correct way to do this in a sense, right? Because there's no music that you have to replicate. Each variable is producing something new.
There are old traditions of singing kites in many other countries. Those often feature the sound-making instruments, or voice boxes, flying in the air with the kites. But Erdim created and built his own hurdy-gurdy style instrument. It gives him more of a physical connection with the sound and the experience.
Looking for like a state of suspension, you know, where the kite isn't flying like an airplane or like a bird. It's trying to find this moment between like flying and falling. It's sort of trying to find that moment of suspension in the air. And with that, with the particular tension on the line, you get this suspension in the sound as well. And that's what I'm always looking for.
Lake Macbride is just outside of Solon, between Iowa City and Cedar Rapids. It's named after Thomas Macbride, a former professor and president of the University of Iowa, who is known as the father of conservation in Iowa. Erdim says he's explored parts of Lake Macbride that he wouldn't normally have gone, in order to find the right conditions for flying.
This practice is about also like understanding, it makes you look at the landscape differently, the terrain, what's around you, and read that differently, because you know, you have to sort of say, okay, so if it's coming from the trees over there, like from over here, the wind is going to have a certain texture. It's going to, at a certain height, it's going to have a change, right? It's not just about the atmosphere, it's about also understanding the territory. Also, sounds, you know, ambient sounds.
Musicians who learn to play instruments generally have control of the sound, and given a sheet of music, that score can be played as it's written. A kite choir isn't nearly as predictable. There's limited human control, and the atmospheric conditions take care of the rest.
You have some degree of control, right? You have some agency, but that agency is shared with the agency of the wind as well, what you're listening to. So it's really a kind of a dance, an entanglement. It's not having almost full control, and it's not having almost no control, right? And I think the entanglement is that's kind of the point of the project of the Kite Choir, is that it's a kind of I call it an aesthetic practice of attunement with the atmosphere. You know, at that moment you're kind of, when you're playing these things, you're kind of attached to it.
A lot of people get a kite up in the air by running with it. Erdim says you shouldn't have to do that. He likes the pier at Lake Macbride because it gives him limited space to move, and he has to really focus on what the kite is doing.
Sometimes I've been on piers, and there have been fishermen fishing off of them as well. So, you know, we're kind of doing the same thing. They're kind of they're doing this underwater, and I'm up in the atmosphere. You're trying to sense what's out there at the tip of the line, right, at the end of the line. It's the same thing with the kite line, you know. So when the kite's up there, it becomes a way to, I'm trying to sense both through touch but also through sounds what's happening up there, out there, yeah, in the air.
Erdim's electric hurdy-gurdy wheel works a little bit like a piano and a guitar. The kite line has rosin on it, align bows to steel strings, and there are guitar pickups that help produce the sound that you hear. You can easily build a kite choir of your own. Erdim says you can find a variety of different examples and instructions online, or invent one yourself. And whether you fly at Lake Macbride or a park near you, open your mind and body to what's possible. You may develop a greater awareness and appreciation for nature and the atmosphere around you.
It's important to have these practices today, I think, to care for, to hear inanimate and non-human things more clearly.